Steven Zallain, Oscar-winning screenwriter of Schindler's List and Moneyball, penned the script to Martin Scorsese's The Irishman in 2009. It's 136 pages long, which I believe is over the usual average and considered quite long, though I finished it in about an hour and it didn't feel long at all to me. I can see, though, many of the scenes taking a while, and I'm guessing the movie could push the 3-hour mark. It will definitely be over 2 hours, no question. It's based off of a book called I Heard You Paint Houses by Charles Brandt, a fantastic novel in its own right, and the movie is due for release in 2019. I won't cover the story too much in this video. I've made a fair few videos on the story itself which you can check out on my channel. Some parts of the screenplay feel very similar to Goodfellas when Frank joins the mob, for instance, but from there it definitely becomes its own thing. It also has connections to Scorsese's other mob movies. For example, the Teamsters pension fund that De Niro's character in Casino mentions is what paid for the Las Vegas casinos, is, well, pretty much what exactly this film is about, or at least partly. One of the very first things you notice about the Irishman script is the sheer amount of flashbacks and just how constant they are. Zallain goes full on John Carpenter's Ghost of Mars by having flashbacks within flashbacks within flashbacks. Sometimes I felt it was a bit much, that we were practically given a flashback for every little thing. The movie is narrated by Frank Sheeran, and whenever he goes over an event, even mentioning it offhandedly for a few seconds, it seems we always get a flashback for it. It's really extreme, like say for example at the end of Goodfellas when Henry Hill says he ordered spaghetti and got egg noodle and ketchup. The way the Irishman script is set up, they'd have done a freeze frame and shown Hill disappointedly unwrapping the noodles. It can get a bit much, but I'm sure Scorsese can easily make it work. Speaking of the narration, there is a lot of it, and it's to be expected because so much goes on in The Irishman that without Sheeran telling us what's going on, we'd be lost. It also makes for some good juxtaposition, with Sheeran's nonchalant and ironic comments accompanying gruesome images of people being strangled with piano wire and cars blowing up, feeling typically Scorsese-ish. I did feel the script was quite vague in some places, especially in regards to dialogue and camera direction. With the dialogue, a lot of scenes mention characters talk to each other without actually specifying what they're saying. I see this as leaving room for the actors to improvise, who will also surely have personal scripts for their own characters. With the lack of camera direction, it goes hand in hand with what Scorsese said about this movie being a lot different in terms of whip pans and stuff to Goodfellas and Casino. If you have read the scripts to those movies, a lot of that kind of stuff is already in the script, but here the screenplay leaves a lot of room for the director to pick and choose the way he shoots a scene. Still though, there are a lot of Scorseseisms, a lot of freeze frames and voiceovers and jumping between time periods, and it does feel coherent and structured, not messy and all over the place. Now if you've read the book I Heard You Paint Houses, be prepared to have huge chunks of information not included in the film. Of course, it might be different when the movie comes out, seeing as though the script I have is from 2009. But a lot of the stuff from the book is skipped altogether or else in some way condensed. It goes without saying anyway, since the book has far too much to be covered in a single film, unless you want to bash your audience over the head with the union stuff. The union business from the book, I think, is what is sacrificed more than anything else. A lot of the Teamster stuff is covered, of course, probably more than anything else in the screenplay, but again, the book has a lot more. In terms of everything else, just for your information, Frank's childhood is not included at all. The World War II flashbacks are in the film. A great deal of the movie covers Frank's return to America and being affiliated with the mob. His working under Jimmy Hoffa and all that mob stuff and union stuff is in the movie. The Crazy Joe gallows segment is in the film, and of course the old age scenes. It's all very engrossing, just like the book. The one part I may have reduced is the many scenes where the second level flashback set in the 50s, the bulk of the story, are intercut with the first level flashback scenes set in 1979, where Frank Sheeran and Russell Buffalino drive with their families across state. Not a lot happens during this, the 1975 flashback scenes, and it does take up a few pages. My thinking is that these scenes are given prominence because Scorsese is trying to build tension, what with the relationship between Hoffa and the mob souring in the second level flashbacks, and he's still alive in the 1975 ones. So the question is starting to build, what eventually happens to Jimmy Hoffa? It makes a lot more sense for people who are going into the film blind, the group of filmgoers who I think will get the most out of the film, seeing as though the average filmgoer won't know that in real life Sheeran said that he killed Hoffa. I Heard You Paint Houses was written as a whodunit, a claim by Brandt which I always found really weird, seeing as though Sheeran gets the order to kill Hoffa in around like the first or second chapter, so you've pretty much just given it away. whereas in Zallain's script, it's not until the latter stages of the film. The movie works better as a mystery than the book, and thus I think it will come off as more shocking to audiences that Frank actually went through with the murder. I definitely see the film being a lot more effective for general audiences than those who are familiar with the story, since it's set up in such a way that who killed Jimmy Hoffa is a question that is not answered until very late on, whereas you and I already know what happened. I found a few segments from the screenplay frustrating because of missing elements from the book. Nothing major, and like I said, you can't fit everything from the book into a screenplay, but still there were a few things here and there. For example, when Hoffa and Sheeran speak for the first time, the first words that the Teamsters leader says to the hitman is, "I heard you paint houses," meaning I heard you kill people for money. It's the name of the book after all, but this exchange is completely different in the screenplay, and the painting houses line is completely removed. There were also a few other things too, like that scene I mentioned in the video I made on one scene that would blow you away in The Irishman. That scene, which will feature Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino and Harvey Keitel all in the same scene for the only time, isn't in the script. Well, it is, but it's a lot different, and the four of them aren't all together. But you can turn this entire complaint on its head by saying that a lot of the stuff in the screenplay is better than the book, and I prefer the way it's done. For example, there are two hilarious confrontations between Hoffa and Tony Pro that are a lot better than in the novel. And the later scene set in the prison hospital where Frank and the mobsters are all old and feeble, making a nice contrast to the prison scene in Goodfellas, where it's like the mobsters practically own the place. Speaking of which, the one part of the novel where I felt Brandt kind of skimmed through with Sheeran in his old age is the best part of the screenplay in my opinion. It's really good stuff. And it's really sad seeing everyone Frank knows die or disown him. It's magnificent, and there's one line after Brandt, who technically is in the film, though we don't see his face. Instead, he records videos of Sheeran, constantly probing him, while Frank defends his position on the Hoffa murder, saying things like, there was nothing he could do, and that's just the way it works in the mob. All very cliched stuff we hear in mob movies. Eventually though, and this is the true climax of the film for me instead of the actual Hoffa murder, Brandt probes, and Sheeran, he's got his defenses up, he's saying all the same stuff, this is how it works in the mafia, there was nothing I could do, etc, etc. Brandt probes, and Sheeran, who after looking at some photos of him and Hoffa together, looks up, straight at the camera, anguish and pain on his face, and says, "What kind of man does what I did to a friend?" I could feel the remorse from the words, and it brought a tear to the eye. Seriously, I know we're all excited for the film because it's a mafia movie, but the old man Sheeran stuff is really good. The screenplay provides a lot more attention for Sheeran's family than the novel, in particular one of his daughters, Peggy. Those who have read the book will know that she eventually stops talking to him, but the script shows throughout that she begins to mistrust her father from a very young age, and she feels uncomfortable around mobsters like Buffalino despite them treating her nice. When with Hoffa, on the other hand, she has a great time, which I think is the script's way of saying Hoffa was a good man at heart, which I thought was an important thing to do since Sheeran says in the book that he was a good man who cared for his family and the working man, but that isn't mentioned in the script. So this is probably the screenplay's way of doing it, seeing as though Peggy probably represents innocence. There was quite a bit of humour in the script, wise guy humour, to cancel out the overall somber tone the screenplay has. Jimmy Hoffa in particular is pretty funny. Overall though, I'd say it's a lot more grim and thematically richer than, say, Goodfellas, if only for the old man Sheeran scenes. As I said, some parts are better in the book, like the Hoffa court cases, some parts are better in the script, like Sheeran's latter years, and some parts are equal. I'm happy to say that many of the more ferocious lines from the book, like Hoffa's public reaction to JFK's death, remain, and a lot of real-life events are cleverly woven in with things we can only speculate on. Some parts from the novel are just omitted outright, like a lot of supporting characters, and very interestingly, the movie chooses not to even mention that the mob was even partially behind the JFK assassination, which the book heavily implies was the case. I found that very interesting that the movie chooses not to even mention the connection. I did some further research on the copy of the script I have, and it is an early draft of the script apparently, and it's very likely this is not the one they used while shooting. I'm very pleased by this, one because it gives me more to look forward to because I won't know every single thing that happens before going in, and two because there are definitely some things that could be fleshed out a little better or brushed up, especially the Hoffa union wars and court battles, which were a riot in the book. Overall, I think it's a really good script that can serve as a template for a roller coaster of a story, and we all know how good Scorsese is at telling a story. There are several memorable scenes, and it carries an aura of regret and a seeking of redemption for Frank Sheeran, as the last line of the script indicates quite literally, the door is open. The first segment of the screenplay, I'm guessing the first hour or so of the film, covers Sheeran's time in the war and his days as a truck driver. Then he gets involved in the mob, finding out how things worked and meeting several major players in the criminal underworld. It feels like a great gangster movie, and I've no doubt the story will blitz just like the well-paced filmography of Scorsese. So it's already a great mob movie, and then you get the added bonus of Al Pacino popping up and taking center stage of the film for the second act. Then the 1975 disappearance, and eventually Sheeran becoming old, burnt out and sorrowful. A part of someone's life Scorsese has yet to tackle. I think the movie will be thought-provoking, inventive, funny, dramatic, tense, but more than anything else, like the best Scorsese movies, it will be entertaining. Just a great story, really well told. The only real dud is the 1970s storyline, which doesn't really go anywhere until the end, with Sheeran and Buffalino driving around for many scenes, not really doing much. I guess this part will be more interesting for those who don't know much about the story, since in the beginning, Sheeran tells us how difficult it is to kill a friend, and it will probably make audiences think that Sheeran is going to end up killing Buffalino, only for this to be switched and Hoffa taking the bullet. If you have any questions about the script, feel free to ask me in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them, or I may make a new video answering your question. Thanks for watching.